Part 1. The fluorescent lights in the family court mediation room buzzed with the kind of persistent hum that made Sadie Jackson's temples throb. She sat with her spine straight, hands folded in her lap, while across the polished conference table, Catherine and Richard Jackson studied her with the calculating precision of predators circling wounded prey. Their expensive suits whispered authority, their jewelry caught the harsh light like warning signals, and their voices carried the particular brand of cruelty that came wrapped in concern. "We're simply worried about the children's stability," Catherine was saying, her manicured fingers drumming against a leather portfolio thick with what Sadie knew were carefully documented accusations. "Since Michael's passing, we've noticed concerning changes in their behavior, their academic performance, and their overall well-being." Sadie's throat tightened. 2 years. 2 years since the car accident that had torn her world apart, and still, Michael's parents spoke of their son's death as if it were somehow her fault. As if her grief hadn't been deep enough, her mourning was not performative enough for their standards. "The children are thriving," Sadie said quietly, her voice steady despite the tremor in her chest. "They're healing. We all are." Richard leaned forward, his gray eyes cold as winter stones. "Are they? Caleb's grades have dropped significantly. Amaya barely speaks during our visits. And Liam." He shook his head with theatrical disappointment. "The boy needs male guidance and structure. He's becoming unruly." "He's 8 years old," Sadie replied, fighting to keep her voice level. "He's processing the loss of his father. Children don't grieve on schedules that suit adults." Catherine let out a sharp laugh. "Oh, Sadie. Always so dramatic. We're not questioning your love for the children. We're questioning your capacity to provide for them properly." She opened her portfolio, spreading photographs across the table like accusations. "This is your current living situation?" The images showed Sadie's modest 3-bedroom home, the one she'd moved to after selling the larger house she and Michael had shared. It was clean, warm, filled with her children's artwork and family photos, but through the Jacksons' lens, it looked small, insufficient, poor. "We think," Richard continued, his voice deceptively gentle, "that the children would benefit from a more stable environment. More resources. Better schools. The kind of opportunities their father would have wanted for them." "The kind of opportunities you can provide," Sadie said, understanding flooding through her like ice water. "Exactly." Catherine's smile was razor-thin. "We're not heartless, dear. You could visit, of course. Holidays, birthdays. But primary custody, well, that's a conversation for another day." The mediator, a tired-looking woman in her 50s, glanced between them. "Mrs. Jackson, are you saying you're prepared to file for custody?" Before Catherine could respond, the conference room door opened. Sadie looked up, expecting to see Elena Collins, her best friend and attorney who had stepped out to take a call. Instead, she found herself staring into a pair of amber eyes that had haunted her dreams for 15 years. Adrien Carter stood in the doorway, 6 feet and 2 inches of quiet power wrapped in a perfectly tailored charcoal suit. His dark hair was touched with silver now, and fine lines mapped the corners of those devastating eyes, but time had only refined him, sharpened him into something that made her chest tighten with recognition and need. "I apologize for the interruption," he said, his voice carrying the same low, warm timbre that had once whispered promises against her skin in darkened dorm rooms. "I'm Adrien Carter, and I'm here to provide character testimony for Mrs. Jackson." Catherine and Richard exchanged glances, clearly thrown by this unexpected development. "I'm sorry," Catherine said, her voice pitched with artificial sweetness, "but who exactly are you?" Adrien stepped into the room, and Sadie caught the subtle scent of his cologne, something expensive and clean that made her remember buried feelings she'd thought died with her husband. "I'm the CEO of Carter Technologies. I've known Sadie since college, and I can speak to her character, her integrity, and her exceptional capabilities as a mother." The mediator looked up from her notes. Mr. Carter, were you called as a witness by Mrs. Jackson's attorney? I was, Elena said, appearing behind Adrien with a satisfied smile. Mr. Carter has graciously agreed to provide testimony regarding Mrs. Jackson's character and parenting abilities. Sadie stared at Elena, her mind reeling. When had her friend contacted Adrien? How had she even known how to reach him? The questions swirled in her head, but all she could focus on was the way Adrien's presence seemed to fill the room, making the space feel smaller and somehow safer at the same time. Well, Richard said, his voice tight with poorly concealed irritation, I suppose we'd like to hear what Mr. Carter has to say. Adrien moved to the chair beside Sadie, and as he settled into it, she caught another wave of his scent, felt the warmth radiating from his body. When he looked at her, those knowing eyes held a gentleness that made her throat close with emotion. I've had the privilege of knowing Sadie Jackson for over 20 years, he began, his voice carrying easily through the room. In college, she was studying education because she believed every child deserved someone who would fight for them. She tutored struggling students for free, organized study groups, and somehow managed to maintain a perfect GPA while working part-time to support herself. Catherine's lips thinned. That's all very admirable, but college was a long time ago. What can you tell us about her current situation? Adrien's smile was slight, but there was steel beneath it. I can tell you that she's raised 3 remarkable children who are polite, intelligent, and clearly loved. I can tell you that despite facing unimaginable loss, she's maintained her strength and grace. I can tell you that any child would be fortunate to have her as a mother. And how, Richard asked, his voice dripping with skepticism, do you know so much about her current situation? Are you too involved? The question hung in the air like a loaded weapon. Sadie felt her cheeks burn, but Adrien's expression remained perfectly composed. I'm simply someone who recognizes exceptional character when I see it, he said evenly. Sadie Jackson is one of the finest people I've ever known. Her children are lucky to have her. Catherine leaned back in her chair, studying Adrien with calculating eyes. Mr. Carter, you mentioned you're a CEO. What kind of company? Technology development. We specialize in educational software and digital learning platforms. Successful company? Very. Annual revenue? Elena leaned forward. I'm not sure how Mr. Carter's financial status relates to Mrs. Jackson's parenting abilities. It doesn't, Adrien said calmly. But if you're asking whether I believe Sadie Jackson is capable of providing a loving, stable home for her children, the answer is absolutely yes. Wealth doesn't make someone a good parent. Love, dedication, and sacrifice do. And Sadie has all 3 in abundance. Sadie felt tears prick her eyes. She hadn't realized how much she'd needed someone to speak for her, to see her worth when she'd begun to question it herself. The mediator made notes, then looked up. Mr. and Mrs. Jackson, do you have any questions for Mr. Carter? Catherine's smile was sharp. Just one. Mr. Carter, you've been very eloquent about Mrs. Jackson's character. But surely you can see that love isn't always enough? These children have lost their father. They need stability, resources, opportunities. They need a future that their current circumstances simply can't provide. Adrien turned to look at Sadie, and in his eyes she saw something that made her breath catch. Not pity, not condescension, but a recognition so deep it seemed to reach into her soul. Mrs. Jackson, he said quietly, with respect, I think you're confusing resources with love. I've built a multi-million-dollar company, and I can tell you that all the money in the world can't replace what these children have with their mother. They have her attention, her devotion, her presence. They have a woman who knows their fears, their dreams, their individual needs. They have someone who would fight the world for them. His voice dropped, becoming more intimate. That's not something money can buy. Catherine's face flushed with anger. You're being naive, Mr. Carter. Good intentions don't pay for college tuition or provide opportunities. No, Adrien agreed, but they provide something far more valuable. They provide the foundation that makes everything else possible. He looked directly at Sadie. Some things are worth more than money. Some people are worth everything. The words seemed to hang in the air, charged with meaning that went far beyond the legal proceedings. Sadie felt her heart racing, her palms damp with a nervous energy she hadn't experienced in years. The mediator cleared her throat. I think we have enough testimony for today. I'll be reviewing all the information provided and will have a recommendation within the week. As the meeting disbanded, Catherine and Richard gathered their materials with sharp, efficient movements. This isn't over, Catherine said as she passed Sadie's chair. We want what's best for those children, and we won't let misguided emotions stand in the way. When they were gone, Sadie sat in the silence, her hands trembling slightly as the adrenaline began to fade. Elena was packing up her files, chatting with the mediator about scheduling, but Adrien remained seated beside her, his presence a steady, calming force. Thank you, she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. I don't know how Elena reached you, or why you came, but, thank you. Adrien turned to face her fully, and she felt the impact of his attention like a physical touch. You don't need to thank me, Sadie. I meant every word I said in there. Still, She paused, struggling with the surreal nature of the moment. I can't believe you're here. After all these years. I moved back to town 6 months ago, he said quietly. I kept meaning to reach out, but I wasn't sure. He trailed off, and for a moment, she saw past the successful businessman to the young man she'd once known, the one who'd made her laugh until her sides ached and dream of futures that had seemed impossible. I'm glad you did, she said, and meant it. I don't know what I would have done if you hadn't shown up. You would have been fine, he said with quiet certainty. You're stronger than you know, Sadie. You always were. The words hit her like a caress, and she felt something inside her chest that had been frozen for 2 years begin to thaw. It was dangerous, this feeling, this awareness of him as a man rather than just a memory. But for the first time since Michael's death, she felt like she could breathe fully. Elena approached their table, her expression carefully neutral. Ready to go, Sadie? Sadie nodded, gathering her purse, but as she stood, Adrien caught her wrist gently. The contact sent electricity up her arm, and she saw in his eyes that he'd felt it too. If you need anything, he said, his thumb brushing once across her pulse point, anything at all, you call me. Elena has my number. Adrien, I can't ask you to. You're not asking, he said firmly. I'm offering. There's a difference. As they walked toward the parking garage, Sadie felt the weight of the afternoon settling over her like a blanket. The threat from Catherine and Richard was real, but somehow, with Adrien's words echoing in her mind, it felt less insurmountable. That was quite a performance, Elena said once they were alone in the elevator. Performance? Elena gave her a knowing look. Sadie, honey, that man looked at you like you were the only woman in the world. And you looked at him like you were remembering what it felt like to be alive. Heat flooded Sadie's cheeks. It wasn't like that. He was just being kind. Elena's smile was gentle but pointed. When was the last time you let yourself be just a woman, Sadie? Not a mother, not a widow, just, you? The question followed Sadie home, echoing in her mind as she picked up the children from their after-school programs. Caleb was sullen, still angry about the morning's court appearance. Amaya was quiet, her dark eyes too old for her 12 years. Only Liam seemed unaffected, chattering about his day as they drove home. Mom, Caleb said as they pulled into their driveway, are we really going to have to live with grandmother and grandfather? The question hit her like a physical blow. She turned in her seat to face her eldest son, seeing Michael's eyes staring back at her with fear and confusion. No, baby, she said firmly. We're going to stay right here, in our home, together. I promise. But what if the judge says we have to? Then we'll figure it out, she said, reaching back to squeeze his hand. We're a family, Caleb. Nothing and no one is going to change that. As they went inside, Sadie's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. How did the rest of the afternoon go? Adrien. She stared at the message, her heart doing something complicated in her chest. Elena must have given him her number. The thought should have annoyed her, but instead, it sent a flutter of something warm and dangerous through her stomach. She typed back, better. Thank you again for today. His response came quickly, anytime. I meant what I said. That evening, after homework was done and the children were in bed, Sadie sat in her living room with a cup of tea, staring at Adrien's number in her phone. She couldn't shake the image of him in that conference room, the way he'd looked at her, the certainty in his voice when he defended her. If you haven't already, hit that subscribe button and join our Dear Love Diaries family. Your special place in this community of heartfelt stories is waiting for you. These passionate journeys of souls connecting against all odds have brought together thousands of beautiful hearts just like yours. Make sure you hit the bell too, so you'll know immediately when a new story unfolds in our diary of love. 15 years. 15 years since she'd seen Adrien Carter, since she'd made the choice to marry Michael instead of following her heart to graduate school in California where Adrien had been accepted to a prestigious MBA program. She'd chosen security over passion, stability over the unknown. And for most of those years, she'd been happy with that choice. But now, sitting in the quiet of her home, she couldn't stop thinking about the way Adrien's eyes had found hers across that conference room, the way his presence had made her feel protected and seen in ways she'd almost forgotten were possible. Her phone buzzed again. Another text from Adrien. I know this is presumptuous, but would you like to have coffee sometime? I'd like to hear about your life, your children. No pressure. Sadie stared at the message, her thumb hovering over the keyboard. Part of her wanted to say yes immediately, to grab onto this unexpected lifeline. But another part of her, the part that had been Michael's wife for 15 years, felt the familiar weight of guilt. She typed, I'd like that. But Adrien, it's complicated. His response was immediate, everything worthwhile is complicated. But it doesn't have to be impossible. The word sent a shiver through her. She closed her eyes, remembering the girl she'd been in college, the one who'd believed in grand gestures and destined love. That girl had been buried under years of responsibility and grief, but tonight, for the first time in forever, she felt her stirring to life. Tomorrow, she typed before she could change her mind. Tomorrow, he confirmed. I'll pick you up at 10. We'll go somewhere quiet where we can talk. As Sadie prepared for bed, she caught her reflection in the bathroom mirror. She looked tired, older than her 39 years, but there was something in her eyes that hadn't been there that morning. Hope, maybe. Or possibility. Tomorrow, she would see Adrien Carter again. The man who had once held her heart and who, with just a few words in a conference room, had reminded her that hearts could be awakened even after they'd been broken. The thought terrified and thrilled her in equal measure. But as she drifted off to sleep, for the first time in 2 years, Sadie Jackson fell asleep smiling. Part 2. 21 years earlier, Sadie Williams had been a junior at Howard University, her textbook spread across a corner table in the library, her future mapped out in careful, practical steps. She would graduate summa cum laude, get her master's in education, and spend her life shaping young minds. It was a good plan, a safe plan, a plan that her grandmother would have been proud of. What she hadn't planned for was Adrien Carter. He'd appeared at her table on a Tuesday in October, his amber eyes bright with mischief and something deeper she couldn't quite name. Excuse me, he'd said, his voice carrying just the hint of a smile, but I think you're sitting in my spot. She'd looked up from her developmental psychology textbook, ready to deliver a cutting response about library etiquette, and found herself momentarily speechless. He was beautiful in that effortless way that some men possessed, tall and lean with dark hair that looked like he'd been running his fingers through it and a smile that was both boyish and knowing. "Your spot," she'd managed to say, lifting an eyebrow. "Well, not officially," he'd admitted, sliding into the chair across from her without invitation. "But I've been watching you study here for 3 weeks, and I've been trying to work up the courage to introduce myself. I'm Adrien." "Sadie," she'd said, and something in his expression had shifted when she'd said her name, as if he'd been waiting his whole life to hear it. What followed had been the most intense 18 months of her life. Adrien was pre-business, brilliant and ambitious, with dreams of creating something that would change the world. He talked about technology and innovation with the same passion that she discussed educational theory, and somehow, impossibly, they'd found a rhythm that worked. They'd studied together, argued about everything from politics to pop culture, and fallen in love with the kind of intensity that only existed in that magical space between adolescence and adulthood. Adrien had been her first everything, first real love, first lover, first heartbreak. Because that's what it had been, in the end. A heartbreak that had shaped every decision she'd made since. The opportunity had come in their senior year. Adrien had been accepted to Stanford's MBA program, a full scholarship that would launch him toward the future he'd always envisioned. Sadie had received her own offer, a graduate fellowship at Berkeley that would allow her to pursue her master's while working with at-risk youth. "Come with me," Adrien had said, his hands framing her face as they stood in her dorm room, acceptance letters scattered across her desk like possibilities and promises. "California, Sadie. We can build something together." But Michael Jackson had also been there, solid and dependable, offering her a different kind of future. He was a year older, already graduated and working for his father's investment firm. He'd been pursuing her quietly for months, and while he didn't make her heart race the way Adrien did, he offered something Adrien couldn't: certainty. "I love you," Adrien had said, and she'd seen her future in his eyes, bright and uncertain and full of potential. "I know," she'd whispered back, and she'd meant it. But love, she'd learned, wasn't always enough. She'd chosen Michael. Chosen the ring he'd offered, the stability of staying on the East Coast, the predictable path that led to a suburban home and 3 beautiful children. And for 15 years, she'd been happy with that choice. Michael had been a good husband, a devoted father, a steady presence in her life. But now, sitting in her car outside the small cafe where she was meeting Adrien, Sadie couldn't help but wonder what might have been. What would her life have looked like if she'd been brave enough to follow her heart instead of her head? The cafe was quiet, tucked away in a part of town that managed to feel intimate despite being surrounded by the urban sprawl. Adrien was already there when she arrived, sitting at a corner table with 2 cups of coffee and an expression that was both nervous and hopeful. "You came," he said, standing as she approached, and she caught that scent again, clean and masculine and achingly familiar. "I said I would," she replied, settling into the chair across from him. The movement brought her closer than she'd intended, and she felt the electric awareness that seemed to crackle between them whenever they were in the same space. "You look." He paused, studying her face with an intensity that made her cheeks warm. "You look exactly like I remembered, and completely different at the same time." "Older," she said with a rueful smile. "Tired." "Beautiful," he said simply, and the word hit her like a physical touch. "You've always been beautiful, Sadie, but now, there's something else. A depth. A strength." She wrapped her fingers around her coffee cup, needing something to hold on to. 15 years changes a person. "Tell me about them," he said quietly. "The good parts and the hard parts. I want to know everything." So she did. She told him about Michael, about their wedding and the early years of their marriage when everything had seemed so simple and clear. She told him about Caleb's birth, how holding her son for the first time had rewritten her understanding of love. She told him about Amaya's artistic gifts and Liam's boundless energy, about bedtime stories and soccer games and the 1,000 small moments that had made up her life. "Michael was a good man," she said, and was surprised to find that she could say it without the crushing weight of grief that usually accompanied any mention of her late husband. He loved the children, loved me in his way. But toward the end. What? Adrien prompted gently. I felt like I was disappearing, she admitted, the words coming out in a rush. Like I was so busy being a wife and mother that I'd forgotten how to be just me. Michael didn't understand why I wanted to go back to work when Liam started school. He thought I had everything I needed. But you didn't. No, she said quietly. I didn't. And then he died, and I felt so guilty for all the things I'd wished were different. For all the times I'd felt trapped or restless or... She stopped, unable to voice the deepest shame. For all the times you thought about me, Adrien said, his voice low and understanding. She looked up at him, startled by his perception. How did you? Because I thought about you too, he said simply. Every day for 15 years. I followed your life from a distance, Sadie. I knew when you got married, when your children were born. I knew when Michael died. The revelation should have frightened her, but instead, it sent a warm flutter through her chest. You never married. No. His smile was rueful. I built a company instead. Threw myself into work, told myself that was enough. But it wasn't. Nothing ever was, because it wasn't you. The words hung between them, heavy with implication and possibility. Sadie felt something in her chest that had been dormant for years beginning to stir to life. Adrien, she said carefully, I can't be that girl anymore. The one who believed in fairy tales and happy endings. I have 3 children, a custody battle, responsibilities. I know, he said, reaching across the table to cover her hand with his. The contact sent electricity racing up her arm. I'm not asking you to be that girl. I'm asking you to be the woman you are now. The one who fights for her children, who raises them with love and strength and grace. The one who survived losing everything and still managed to keep her family together. His thumb traced across her knuckles, a gentle touch that somehow felt more intimate than a kiss. That woman is extraordinary, Sadie. That woman is everything I never knew I was looking for. She stared down at their joined hands, marveling at how right it felt, how her skin seemed to remember his touch even after all these years. It's complicated, she said again, but this time the words felt like a question rather than a statement. I know, he said again. But I'm not going anywhere. Whether you're ready for this or not, whether it takes days or months or years, I'm not going anywhere. They talked for 2 hours, the conversation flowing as easily as it had in college, punctuated by moments of charged silence when their eyes would meet and hold. Adrien told her about his company, about the educational software they developed, about his quiet satisfaction in creating tools that help children learn. You still want to change the world, she observed, and his smile was the same one that had made her fall in love with him 21 years ago. Some dreams don't die, he said. They just evolve. When it was time to leave, Adrien walked her to her car, his hand resting lightly on the small of her back. The touch was possessive and protective, and Sadie found herself leaning into it despite her better judgment. Dinner, he said as she reached for her car door. Tomorrow night. Let me cook for you. Adrien, I have the children. Bring them, he said without hesitation. I'd like to meet them properly. The offer surprised her. Michael's friends had always treated her children as obstacles to be worked around, but Adrien was actively including them. Are you sure? Liam can be a lot. I'm sure, he said, and there was something in his voice that made her believe him. 7 o'clock. I'll text you the address. As she drove home, Sadie felt a lightness in her chest that she hadn't experienced in years. For the first time since Michael's death, she was looking forward to something that wasn't related to her children's needs or her responsibilities as a single mother. But the guilt crept in as she pulled into her driveway. Michael had been dead for only 2 years. Was she betraying his memory by allowing herself to feel this way about another man? Was she being selfish, thinking about her own happiness when her children were still grieving? Mom! Liam launched himself at her as she walked through the front door, his 8-year-old energy filling the room. Caleb helped me with my math homework, and Amaya drew a picture of you. Sadie hugged her youngest son, breathing in his little boy scent of grass stains and bubble gum. Where are your siblings? Caleb's in his room being grumpy, Liam reported with the casual brutality of a younger sibling. And Amaya's in the art room. The art room was actually a converted den where Sadie had set up easels and supplies for her daughter's growing passion for painting. She found Amaya there, working on a canvas with intense concentration. Hey, baby, Sadie said softly, not wanting to disturb her daughter's focus. Liam said you drew something for me. Amaya looked up, her dark eyes serious. It's not finished yet. She gestured to the canvas, where a woman with Sadie's face was emerging from brushstrokes of warm browns and golds. You've been sad for so long, but today you look different. The observation hit Sadie like a gentle blow. If her 12-year-old daughter could see the change in her after just one morning with Adrien, what did that say about how deeply her grief had affected her children? Different how? She asked, settling into the chair beside Amaya's easel. Lighter, Amaya said thoughtfully. Like you remember how to smile with your whole face instead of just your mouth. The insight was so mature, so perceptive, that Sadie felt tears prick her eyes. You're very observant, sweetheart. Dad used to say that, Amaya said quietly. He said I saw things other people missed. He was right. Sadie reached over to tuck a strand of hair behind her daughter's ear. Amaya, how would you feel about having dinner with someone tomorrow night? A friend of mine from college. Amaya's brush paused on the canvas. A man friend? Yes. Are you going to marry him? The directness of the question caught Sadie off guard. No, baby. We're just catching up. He's someone I knew a long time ago. But you like him, Amaya said, and it wasn't a question. Sadie considered lying, offering some careful deflection, but something in her daughter's eyes stopped her. Yes, she said quietly. I do like him. Amaya nodded slowly, then returned to her painting. Okay. As long as he's nice to you. He is, Sadie said, and realized it was true. Even after all these years, even with all the complications, Adrien was still fundamentally kind. Finding Caleb required more navigation. Her 14-year-old son had inherited his father's tendency to retreat when emotions ran high, and she found him in his room, allegedly doing homework but actually staring at his phone. Hey, she said, knocking on his open door. Mind if I come in? Caleb shrugged, which she took as permission. His room was a typical teenage disaster zone, clothes and books scattered across every surface, but it was his space, and she respected that. How was school? She asked, settling on the edge of his bed. Fine. The standard teenager response that meant nothing and everything. Caleb, I wanted to talk to you about tomorrow night. We're having dinner with a friend of mine. That got his attention. He looked up from his phone, his dark eyes, so much like Michael's, wary. What kind of friend? Someone I went to college with. His name is Adrien, and he's the one who spoke for us in court yesterday. The guy who made grandmother angry? Sadie almost smiled at the satisfaction in Caleb's voice. Her son had little love for his paternal grandparents, who had always made it clear that they considered him too emotional, too much like his mother. Yes, that's him. Caleb was quiet for a long moment, and Sadie could see him processing, weighing his words. Mom, are you dating him? The question hung in the air between them, loaded with all the complications of being a teenager whose mother was still young enough to want companionship and love. I don't know, she said honestly. Right now, we're just friends. But Caleb, I want you to know that no one will ever replace your father. No one could. But that doesn't mean I have to be alone forever. I know, he said quietly. I don't want to forget him. The fear in his voice broke her heart. Oh, baby, she said, moving closer to him on the bed. You won't forget him. I won't let you forget him. Your father will always be part of our family, part of who we are. That doesn't change, no matter what happens. Caleb nodded, but she could see the uncertainty still clouding his features. What if this guy tries to be our new dad? Then we'll deal with it, she said firmly. But Caleb, Adrien isn't trying to replace anyone. He's just someone who cares about us. Someone who wants to help. Like how? Well, for starters, he helped us in court yesterday. And he's successful enough that if Catherine and Richard try to say I can't provide for you kids. She trailed off, not wanting to put that burden on her son's shoulders. But Caleb was smart, and he caught the implication immediately. He has money. He's done well for himself, yes. But that's not why I'm having dinner with him, Caleb. I'm having dinner with him because he makes me laugh. Because he reminds me of who I used to be before I became so focused on just surviving. It was more honesty than she'd intended to share, but something in Caleb's expression shifted, becoming more understanding. Okay, he said finally. But if he's weird to us, I'm calling him out. Deal, Sadie said, and meant it. That evening, as she tucked Liam into bed, her youngest son surprised her with his own questions. Mommy, is the man from court going to be our new daddy? No, sweetheart, she said, smoothing his hair back from his forehead. No one is going to be your new daddy. But he might be our friend. Will he play video games with me? The question was so quintessentially Liam that Sadie couldn't help but smile. I don't know. Would you like him to? Maybe, Liam said, scrunching up his face. Is he nice? Grandma and Grandpa can be kinda mean sometimes. The observation stung because it was true. Catherine and Richard had never been outright cruel to Sadie, but their disapproval was a constant presence, a steady drip of criticism that had worn away at her confidence over the years. He's not mean to me, she assured Liam. He's very kind. Good, Liam said with the decisive authority of an 8-year-old. You deserve kind people, Mommy. As Sadie turned off the lights and closed bedroom doors, she reflected on her children's reactions. They were cautious but not resistant, protective but not hostile. Perhaps they, too, were ready for something new in their lives. Her phone buzzed with a text from Adrien, "Thank you for today. For coffee, for trusting me with your story, for agreeing to dinner tomorrow. Sleep well, Sadie." She stared at the message, her thumb hovering over the keyboard. Part of her wanted to respond with something casual and friendly. But another part of her, the part that had been awakened by his touch and his words, wanted to say something real. "Thank you for reminding me who I am beyond being a mother and a widow," she typed back. "Sweet dreams, Adrien." His response came quickly, "You're extraordinary, Sadie Jackson. Don't ever forget that. Have you ever had someone from your past show up just when you needed them most? Share your story in the comments below." As she prepared for bed, Sadie caught sight of herself in the bathroom mirror again. Amaya was right, she did look different. There was something in her eyes that hadn't been there in years, a spark of possibility that felt both thrilling and terrifying. Tomorrow, she would take her children to meet the man who had once held her heart and who, with just a few hours of conversation, had reminded her that hearts could be awakened even after they'd been carefully buried under grief and responsibility. The thought sent a flutter of nervous anticipation through her stomach. She was a 39-year-old widow with 3 children and a complicated legal situation. She had no business feeling like a college girl again. But as she drifted off to sleep, Sadie found herself looking forward to tomorrow with an eagerness that had nothing to do with duty or responsibility and everything to do with the way Adrien Carter had looked at her across a coffee shop table, like she was still capable of being the kind of woman worth pursuing. It was a dangerous feeling. But for the first time in 2 years, dangerous felt like exactly what she needed. Part 3. Adrien's house was nothing like what Sadie had expected. She'd imagined something cold and modern, all glass and steel that spoke of success but not warmth. Instead, she found herself standing before a restored Victorian, complete with wraparound porch and mature oak trees that created a canopy of green over the front yard. "This is where the rich guy lives?" Liam asked from the back seat, his face pressed against the window. "This is where Adrien lives," Sadie corrected gently, though she had to admit she was surprised too. The house felt like a home, not a showpiece. Caleb emerged from the car with teenage reluctance, his shoulders set in the defensive posture he'd perfected over the past 2 years. Amaya followed more quietly, her artist's eyes taking in every detail of the garden that bordered the walkway. "Mom," she said softly, "look at the flowers." Sadie followed her daughter's gaze and felt her breath catch. The garden was a riot of color and texture, but it wasn't the expensive landscaping she might have expected. Instead, it looked lovingly tended, personal, with a mix of flowers that suggested someone who chose plants for joy rather than status. "H.E. Gardens," she murmured, more to herself than to her children. The front door opened before they could knock, and Adrien appeared, dressed in jeans and a simple white button-down that somehow made him look more devastating than his expensive suit had. His sleeves were rolled up, revealing strong forearms, and there was a dish towel thrown over his shoulder. "Perfect timing," he said, his smile encompassing all of them but lingering on Sadie's face. "I hope you're hungry." "I'm starving," Liam announced, any shyness forgotten in the face of promised food. "What are we having?" "Liam," Sadie warned, but Adrien just laughed. "A man after my own heart. We're having my famous, and by famous, I mean I'm the only one who's ever tasted it. Chicken parmesan with homemade pasta." "You made pasta?" Caleb asked, his teenage skepticism warring with obvious interest. "From scratch," Adrien confirmed. "Though I should warn you, it's been a few years since I attempted it. We might end up ordering pizza." The admission was so endearingly honest that Sadie felt some of her own nervous tension ease. This wasn't a performance or an attempt to impress. It felt genuine. Adrien's home was as warm inside as it had appeared from the street. The rooms flowed together naturally, furnished with pieces that looked chosen for comfort rather than show. Books lined built-in shelves, and family photos, his parents, she assumed, and what looked like college friends, created intimate groupings on side tables. "Your house is beautiful," Sadie said as he led them toward the kitchen. "Thank you. I bought it 6 months ago, when I moved back. It needed a lot of work, but I liked the potential." "You did this yourself?" Amaya asked, running her fingers along a carefully restored banister. "Most of it. Kept me busy on weekends." Adrien's smile was self-deprecating. "Turns out I like working with my hands." The kitchen was the heart of the house, clearly renovated but in a way that honored the home's character. A large island dominated the center, and copper pots hung from hooks above a professional-grade stove. The air was rich with the scents of garlic and herbs, and Sadie felt her mouth water. "This smells incredible," she said, moving closer to the stove where something was simmering in a large pot. "Family recipe," Adrien said, lifting the lid to stir the sauce. "My grandmother would roll over in her grave if she knew I was serving it to anyone before perfecting it, but I figured you might be forgiving. Can I help?" The offer came out before Sadie could stop herself, and she saw Adrien's face light up. "I was hoping you'd ask." "Caleb, Amaya, Liam. There are drinks in the fridge, and I have a game system set up in the living room if you're interested." Liam's eyes went wide. "Really? What kind of games?" "All kinds. Racing, adventure, sports. Help yourselves." As the children explored, Sadie found herself alone with Adrien in the warm, fragrant kitchen. He handed her a glass of wine, something red and smooth that tasted expensive. To second chances, he said, touching his glass to hers. To second chances, she echoed, though the words felt loaded with more meaning than she was ready to examine. Working together in the kitchen felt natural in a way that surprised her. Adrien moved with quiet efficiency, checking the pasta and adjusting seasonings, while Sadie assembled a salad and set the table. Their hands brushed as they reached for the same serving bowl, and she felt that now familiar jolt of electricity. "Sadie," Adrien said quietly, and something in his tone made her look up from the vegetables she was chopping. "Yes?" "I need you to know something." He moved closer, close enough that she could see the gold flecks in his amber eyes. "This isn't some rescue fantasy for me. I'm not here because I think you need saving." "Then why are you here?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Because 15 years ago, I let the best thing that ever happened to me walk away. And now I have a second chance to be the man you deserve." The words hit her like a physical touch, sending heat spiraling through her chest. She gripped the edge of the counter, needing something solid to hold on to. "Adrien. I know it's too much, too soon," he said quickly. "I'm not asking for anything you're not ready to give. I just needed you to know where I stand." Before she could respond, Liam's voice carried in from the living room. "Mom. Come see this game. It's so cool." The moment broke, but the awareness remained, humming between them like a live wire. Dinner passed in a blur of conversation and laughter, and Sadie found herself marveling at how easily Adrien connected with her children. He listened to Amaya talk about her art with genuine interest, asking thoughtful questions about her techniques and inspirations. He engaged Caleb in a discussion about sports that gradually led to other topics, drawing her guarded son out of his shell. And with Liam, he was endlessly patient, answering the 8-year-old's rapid-fire questions about everything from the house to his job to whether he'd ever met any famous people. "Have you ever been married?" Liam asked suddenly, and Sadie nearly choked on her wine. "Liam," she warned, but Adrien just smiled. "No, I haven't." "Why not?" "Because I was waiting for the right person," Adrien said simply, his eyes finding Sadie's across the table. "Did you find her?" Liam pressed, oblivious to the charged look passing between the adults. "I think I might have," Adrien said quietly. After dinner, while the children settled in the living room with a movie, Sadie helped Adrien clean the kitchen. The domestic intimacy of the task, washing dishes together, putting away leftovers, moving around each other in the small space, felt both foreign and familiar. "Thank you for tonight," she said as she dried the last plate. "The children, they haven't laughed like that in a long time." "What about you?" Adrien asked, turning to face her. "When was the last time you laughed like that?" The question caught her off guard. "I don't remember," she admitted. "That's a crime," he said, stepping closer. "You have the most beautiful laugh." "Adrien," she said, but it came out more like a plea than a protest. "I know," he said softly. "I know this is complicated. I know you're still grieving, still figuring out who you are without him. But Sadie, I'm not going anywhere. Whatever you need, however long it takes, I'm here." "What if I can't?" she whispered. "What if I'm too broken, too damaged by everything that's happened?" "Then we'll figure it out together," he said, reaching up to brush a strand of hair from her face. The touch was gentle, reverent, and it made her eyes flutter closed. "You're not broken, Sadie. You're healing. And healing takes time." From the living room came the sound of Liam's delighted laughter, followed by Caleb's amused chuckle and Amaya's softer giggle. The sound of her children happy and carefree was like music to Sadie's ears. "They like you," she observed. "I like them too. They're remarkable kids, Sadie. You should be proud." "I am." She paused, then added more quietly, "Michael would have liked you." The admission surprised them both. Adrien's hand stilled against her cheek. You think so? I know so. He was a good man, Adrien. He loved us, provided for us, made me feel safe. But he never. She trailed off, not sure how to voice what she was thinking. Never what? Never made me feel like I was drowning in possibility, she said finally. Never made me feel like my skin was too small for my body, like I might burst from wanting something so much. The words hung in the air between them, honest and raw and dangerous. Adrien's eyes darkened, and she saw his Adam's apple bob as he swallowed hard. Sadie, he said, his voice rough. I should take the children home, she said quickly, stepping back from his touch. It's getting late, and they have school tomorrow. Of course, he said, but she could see the reluctance in his eyes. I'll get their things. As they gathered jackets and said goodbyes, Sadie felt the loss of the evening's magic like a physical ache. Liam hugged Adrien goodbye with the easy affection of childhood, and even Caleb offered a grudging, thanks for dinner, that felt like a victory. Can we come back? Amaya asked as they reached the car. We'll see, sweetheart, Sadie said, not trusting herself to make promises. Adrien walked them to the car, his hand resting on the small of Sadie's back as she buckled Liam into his booster seat. The touch was possessive and gentle, and it sent heat racing up her spine. Drive safely, he said as she settled into the driver's seat. Thank you again for tonight. For everything. Sadie, he said, leaning down to speak through her open window. I meant what I said in there. I'm not going anywhere. As they drove home, the children chattering about the evening, Sadie tried to process what had happened. She felt like she was awakening from a long sleep, and the sensation was both exhilarating and terrifying. Mom, Caleb said as they pulled into their driveway, he's different than I thought he'd be. Different how? Normal. Nice. He doesn't treat us like we're in the way. The observation hit her harder than it should have. Did you think he would? Caleb shrugged. Most of Dad's friends did. And grandmother and grandfather always act like we're too loud or too messy. Adrien isn't like them, Sadie said quietly. No, Caleb agreed. He's not. That night, after the children were in bed, Sadie sat in her kitchen with a cup of tea, trying to make sense of the emotions swirling through her. Her phone buzzed with a text from Adrien. Thank you for sharing your beautiful family with me tonight. Sweet dreams. She stared at the message, her thumb hovering over the keyboard. She could respond with something safe and polite, maintain the careful distance she'd been trying to preserve. Or she could be honest about what the evening had meant to her. Thank you for reminding me how to laugh, she typed back. And for making my children smile. It's been too long. His response came quickly, it's been too long since someone made you smile too. I'd like to change that, if you'll let me. The word sent a flutter of warmth through her chest. She closed her eyes, remembering the feel of his hand against her cheek, the way he'd looked at her in the kitchen like she was something precious and fragile and worth cherishing. I'm scared, she typed before she could stop herself. So am I, he responded. But some things are worth being scared for. As Sadie prepared for bed, she found herself thinking about what Adrien had said about healing taking time. She'd spent 2 years focused on surviving, on getting through each day for her children's sake. But tonight, for the first time, she'd felt like she might be ready for something more than just survival. She was still frightened by the intensity of her feelings for Adrien, still weighted down by guilt and uncertainty. But beneath those familiar emotions, something new was taking root. Hope, maybe. Or possibility. Whatever it was, it felt like the beginning of something that could change everything. Part 4. Over the next 2 weeks, Adrien became a constant but undemanding presence in their lives. He appeared at Liam's soccer game, cheering from the sidelines with genuine enthusiasm. He showed up at the grocery store where Sadie was struggling with a crying Liam and a cart full of weekly shopping, quietly taking over the logistics so she could comfort her son. He sent flowers to Amaya after she won a school art contest, not roses or expensive arrangements, but a simple bouquet of sunflowers because he'd remembered her mentioning they were her favorite. Each gesture was small, thoughtful, and utterly without expectation of reciprocation. He never pushed for more time, never made demands, never acted like his help came with strings attached. And somehow, that made Sadie want to give him everything. "He's good at this," Elena observed one afternoon as they watched Adrien help Liam with his homework at the kitchen table. Elena had stopped by ostensibly to discuss the custody case, but Sadie suspected her friend was really there to assess the situation with Adrien. "Good at what?" Sadie asked, though she knew exactly what Elena meant. "Being part of your life without taking it over. That's not easy to do." Sadie watched as Adrien patiently explained long division for the third time, his voice never showing frustration even when Liam's attention wandered to the toy truck on the table. He was always like that. Even in college, he had this way of making you feel heard without making you feel managed. "And how does that make you feel?" Sadie considered the question. "Terrified," she said finally. "And grateful. And guilty." "The guilt will ease," Elena said quietly. "Michael loved you, Sadie. He wouldn't want you to spend the rest of your life alone. I know that intellectually. But emotionally. Emotionally, you're afraid that loving someone else means you didn't love him enough." The observation hit so close to home that Sadie felt tears prick her eyes. "Yes. Love isn't finite, honey. Your heart-loving Adrien doesn't take anything away from what you felt for Michael. It just means your heart is big enough for both." That evening, after Elena had gone and the children were in bed, Sadie found herself alone with Adrien in her living room. He'd stayed to help Caleb with a science project, but the work was finished now, and there was no reason for him to linger except that neither of them seemed ready for him to leave. "Can I ask you something?" Sadie said, curled into the corner of her sofa while Adrien sat on the opposite end, close enough to touch but carefully maintaining distance. "Anything. Why did you really come back here? To this town, I mean. You could live anywhere." Adrien was quiet for a long moment, his knowing eyes studying her face. "Because this is where you are," he said simply. "I told myself it was business, that the market was right for expansion, that I missed the pace of a smaller city. But the truth is, I've been building a life that would be worthy of you for 15 years. And when I heard about Michael's death..." He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. "I knew I couldn't waste any more time." "That's incredibly romantic," Sadie said, "and slightly terrifying." "I know. I know how it sounds. But Sadie, I've dated other women, had relationships, tried to move on. Nothing ever felt real. Nothing ever felt like home. And this does?" "You do," he said, his voice low and intense. "You and your children, this life you've built. It feels like everything I've been missing without knowing what I was looking for." The word sent warmth blooming through her chest, and she had to look away from the intensity in his eyes. "Adrien, I need you to understand something. I'm not the same person I was in college. I'm a mother first, everything else second. My children will always come before my own wants or needs." "I know," he said. "That's one of the things I love about you." The word love hung in the air between them, and Sadie's heart skipped. "Don't," she said quickly. "Don't say that word. Not yet." "Why not?" "Because once you say it, everything changes. And I'm not ready for everything to change." Adrien studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Okay. No declarations of love. But Sadie, I need you to know that whatever this is between us, it's not going away. I've tried for 15 years to get over you, and it didn't work. I'm done pretending I don't feel what I feel. What do you feel? She asked, though she wasn't sure she was ready for the answer. Like I've been holding my breath for 15 years, and I can finally breathe again, he said simply. Like I've been living in black and white, and you've brought back all the color. The poetry of his words made her chest tight with emotion. You always were good with words. I'm better with actions, he said, and there was something in his voice that made her look up at him. Sadie, would you let me take you out? Just the two of us, no children, no responsibilities. A real date. The suggestion sent a flutter of nervous excitement through her stomach. I don't know if I'm ready for that. When was the last time you did something just for yourself? The question caught her off guard. I don't remember. That's what I thought. Adrien leaned forward, his elbows on his knees, his eyes serious. One evening, Sadie. Let me remind you what it feels like to be courted, to be treasured, to be the center of someone's attention not because you're a mother or a widow, but because you're an extraordinary woman. I don't have anyone to watch the children. Elena already said she'd do it, he said, and Sadie's eyes widened. You talked to Elena about this? I asked her if she thought you'd be ready for a real date. She said probably not, but that you needed one anyway. Despite herself, Sadie smiled. She knows me too well. So? Tomorrow night? I promise to have you home at a reasonable hour. Sadie looked at Adrien's hopeful face, at the careful way he was holding himself as if her answer mattered more than anything in the world. The smart thing would be to say no, to maintain the careful boundaries she'd been trying to establish. But looking at him, she realized she was tired of being smart. Tired of being careful. Yes, she said quietly, and watched his face transform with joy. Yes? Yes. But Adrien, I need you to understand. No expectations, he said quickly. Just dinner, conversation, and the chance to make you smile. The next evening, as Sadie prepared for her first real date in over 15 years, she felt like a teenager getting ready for prom. She'd changed clothes 3 times, finally settling on a simple black dress that made her feel feminine without being overly dressy. Elena had arrived early to spend time with the children, ostensibly to give Sadie time to get ready but really, Sadie suspected, to make sure she didn't lose her nerve and cancel. You look beautiful, Elena said as Sadie emerged from her bedroom, checking her reflection one last time in the hallway mirror. I feel ridiculous, Sadie admitted. Like I'm playing dress-up. You feel nervous, Elena corrected. There's a difference. The doorbell rang, and Sadie's stomach performed a complicated flip. He's here. Go, Elena said, giving her a gentle push toward the door. Have fun. Remember what that feels like. Adrien stood on her front porch holding a single white rose, dressed in dark slacks and a navy blue shirt that brought out his eyes. He looked devastatingly handsome, and for a moment, Sadie forgot how to breathe. You're beautiful, he said softly, his eyes taking in every detail of her appearance like he was trying to memorize her. Thank you, she managed, accepting the rose. You clean up pretty well yourself. The children appeared in the hallway behind her, and Adrien's smile widened to include them. You look fancy, Mom, Liam observed with 8-year-old directness. Thank you, sweetheart. You be good for Elena, okay? We will, Amaya promised, though Sadie caught the knowing look in her daughter's eyes. At 12, Amaya was old enough to understand exactly what was happening. Have fun, Caleb said quietly, and there was something in his voice that sounded almost like permission. The restaurant Adrien had chosen was intimate without being overly romantic, with warm lighting and quiet corners that invited conversation. He'd requested a table by the window, and as they settled into their seats, Sadie felt some of her nervousness begin to ease. This is lovely, she said, looking around at the softly lit space. I wanted somewhere we could talk without shouting over noise, Adrien said. I've been waiting 15 years to have a real conversation with you. I didn't want to waste it. The waiter appeared to take their drink orders, and Adrien suggested a bottle of wine that sounded expensive and sophisticated. Sadie found herself relaxing as they talked, the conversation flowing as easily as it had in college. "Tell me about your company," she said after they'd ordered their meals. "Elena mentioned you develop educational software?" Adrien's face lit up with genuine enthusiasm. "We create learning platforms for children with different learning styles." The idea came from remembering how frustrated I was in school when teachers only taught one way. I kept thinking there had to be a better approach. "That's incredible," Sadie said, and meant it. "You're literally changing how children learn." "That was always your passion," Adrien said quietly. "Education, helping kids reach their potential. I suppose in some way, I've been trying to honor that." The admission sent warmth flooding through her chest. "You built your career around something that mattered to me?" "Everything I've done has been about becoming someone worthy of you," he said simply. "Even when I told myself I was moving on, even when I tried to date other women, part of me was always asking, would Sadie be proud of this? Would this make her happy?" "Adrien," she said, her voice catching slightly. "That's pathetic?" "Beautiful," she said firmly. "Heartbreaking and beautiful." Their food arrived, providing a natural break in the intensity of the conversation. As they ate, Adrien told her about his travels, his business successes and failures, the house he'd bought and renovated with his own hands. Sadie found herself sharing stories about her children, about the challenges of single motherhood, about the small victories that had kept her going during the darkest days after Michael's death. "You're an amazing mother," Adrien said as she finished telling him about Amaya's first art show at school. "The way you talk about them, the pride in your voice, they're lucky to have you." "Some days I feel like I'm barely keeping my head above water," she admitted. "Like I'm failing them in 1,000 small ways." "Every parent feels that way," Adrien said gently. "But Sadie, your children are remarkable. They're kind, intelligent, well-adjusted kids who clearly feel loved and secure. That doesn't happen by accident." "Michael was a good father," she said quietly, feeling the familiar pang of guilt whenever she talked about her children without mentioning their father. "I'm sure he was. But they've been through loss, trauma, upheaval, and they're still thriving. That's because of you." The conviction in his voice made her eyes burn with unshed tears. "How do you do that?" "Do what?" "Make me feel like I'm enough," she said softly. "Like I'm not just surviving, but actually succeeding." "Because you are," Adrien said, reaching across the table to cover her hand with his. "You're more than enough, Sadie. You're extraordinary." The touch of his hand sent familiar electricity racing up her arm, but this time, instead of pulling away, she let herself enjoy it. Let herself remember what it felt like to be touched by someone who saw her as more than just a caretaker or obligation. "I've missed this," she said quietly. "Missed what?" "Being seen. Not as Caleb and Amaya and Liam's mother, not as Michael's widow, not as the woman who needs to be managed or judged or controlled. Just me." "You are magnificent," Adrien said, his thumb tracing gentle circles across her knuckles. "Every part of you. The mother, the widow, the woman who's surviving impossible circumstances with grace and strength. But most of all, just Sadie. The woman who makes me want to be better than I am." The words hung between them, intimate and charged with possibility. Sadie felt something inside her chest that had been frozen for 2 years beginning to thaw, and the sensation was both wonderful and terrifying. "I should probably get home," she said eventually, though everything in her wanted to stay in this moment forever. "Of course," Adrien said, but she could see the reluctance in his eyes. "Though I have to say, this has been the best evening I've had in, well, 15 years. As they walked to his car, Adrien's hand found the small of her back, a touch that was becoming familiar and cherished. The drive home was quiet, filled with a comfortable intimacy that felt both new and achingly familiar. As they drove home, Sadie noticed the same dark sedan that had been parked near the restaurant now following a few cars behind them. She shook her head, telling herself she was being paranoid. But the feeling of being watched lingered long after they'd reached home safely. "Thank you," Sadie said as they pulled into her driveway. "For dinner, for the conversation, for..." She trailed off, not sure how to articulate what the evening had meant to her. "For reminding you that you're more than just a mother and a widow?" Adrien suggested gently. "Yes," she said gratefully. "Exactly that." Adrien walked her to the door, and for a moment, they stood on her front porch in the soft glow of the porch light. The air between them was charged with possibility, with the awareness that this was a moment that could change everything. "Sadie," Adrien said quietly, his hand coming up to cup her cheek. "May I kiss you?" The question sent her heart racing. She knew she should say no, should maintain the careful boundaries she'd been trying to preserve. But looking into his amber eyes, seeing the tenderness and desire there, she found herself nodding. The kiss was gentle at first, tentative, a question rather than a demand. But as she responded, as her hands found their way to his chest and she felt his heart racing beneath her palms, it deepened into something that made her knees weak and her head spin. When they finally broke apart, both of them were breathing hard, and Sadie felt like the ground beneath her feet had shifted permanently. "Wow," she whispered. "Yeah," Adrien agreed, his forehead resting against hers. "Wow." "I should go inside," she said, but made no move to step away from him. "You should," he agreed, but his arms tightened around her waist. They stood there for a long moment, holding each other in the soft darkness, both aware that something fundamental had changed between them. Finally, with visible reluctance, Adrien stepped back. "Sweet dreams, Sadie," he said softly. "Sweet dreams, Adrien." As she watched him drive away, Sadie touched her lips, still feeling the warmth of his kiss. Inside the house, she found Elena reading on the couch, the children long since asleep. "How did it go?" Elena asked, but one look at Sadie's face told her everything she needed to know. "Oh, honey. You're falling for him." "I think I already fell," Sadie said quietly, sinking onto the couch beside her friend. "I think I fell 15 years ago and never got back up." "And how does that feel?" Sadie considered the question. "Like coming back to life," she said finally. "And like I might be making the biggest mistake of my life." "Why a mistake?" "Because what if I'm not ready? What if I mess this up? What if the children get attached and something goes wrong? What if it goes right?" Elena countered gently. "What if this is exactly what you and your children need?" As Elena gathered her things to leave, she paused at the door. "Sadie, you deserve to be happy. You deserve to be loved. Michael would want that for you." After Elena left, Sadie sat in her quiet living room, her fingers still touching her lips where Adrien had kissed her. She thought about the evening, about the way he'd looked at her across the dinner table, about the way her body had responded to his touch. For the first time in 2 years, she felt like herself again. Not just a mother, not just a widow, but a woman capable of being desired and cherished and loved. It was a dangerous feeling. But as she made her way upstairs to bed, Sadie found herself hoping that tomorrow would bring another chance to feel this alive, this present, this beautifully, terrifyingly human. The thought of Adrien's hands on her face, his lips against hers, sent heat flooding through her body. She was a 39-year-old woman who had been touched by desire, and for the first time since Michael's death, that felt like something to celebrate rather than something to feel guilty about. Tomorrow, she would have to face the reality of what this meant for her life, her children, her future. But tonight, she would let herself remember what it felt like to be wanted, to be seen, to be kissed by a man who looked at her like she was the answer to every question he'd ever asked. It was enough. For now, it was more than enough. Part 5. The photographs arrived on a Tuesday morning, delivered in a manila envelope with no return address. Sadie found them scattered across her kitchen counter when she returned from dropping the children at school, each image a carefully captured moment that had felt private and precious when it was happening. There was Adrien kissing her on the front porch after their dinner date. Adrien's hand on her back as they walked through the farmer's market the previous weekend. Adrien lifting Liam onto his shoulders at the soccer game, while Sadie watched with unmistakable affection written across her face. The photographs were professionally taken, clearly the work of someone who had been watching them for weeks. But it was the note attached that made Sadie's blood run cold. "We thought you should see what your moral fitness looks like from the outside. The children deserve better than a mother who flaunts her relationships so publicly. They've expedited the hearing, but we still have 2 weeks to prepare. Come prepared to explain your choices." It was signed with Catherine's careful script. Sadie's hands shook as she studied each image, seeing her growing relationship with Adrien through the lens of judgment and condemnation. What had felt beautiful and healing now looked tawdry and irresponsible. A grieving widow carrying on with another man while her children watched. Her phone rang, and Elena's number appeared on the screen. "Did you get them too?" Elena asked without preamble. "You have copies?" "They were delivered to my office an hour ago, along with a formal motion to expedite the custody hearing." "Sadie, they're serious about this. How bad is it?" Sadie asked, though she already knew the answer. "It's not good. They're painting you as emotionally unstable, using your relationship with Adrien as evidence that you're prioritizing your own needs over your children's well-being." "But that's not true," Sadie said desperately. "The children like Adrien. He's been good for them, good for all of us. I know that, and you know that, but in a courtroom, perception matters as much as reality. And the perception these photos create." Elena didn't need to finish the sentence. Sadie could see it clearly herself, a widow who wasn't grieving properly, who was exposing her children to new relationships too soon, who was more concerned with her own romantic fulfillment than her children's stability. "What do I do?" Sadie asked, though part of her already knew the answer. "You have a choice to make," Elena said gently. "You can distance yourself from Adrien until after the custody hearing, show the court that your children are your only priority. Or you can fight for your right to have a relationship, but understand that it might cost you custody of your children." The choice felt impossible. Choose Adrien and risk losing her children, or choose her children and lose the first real happiness she'd felt in years. "I need to call him," Sadie said finally. "Sadie. I need to call him, Elena. He deserves to know what's happening." Adrien answered on the first ring. "Good morning, beautiful. I was just thinking about you. Adrien, we need to talk. Can you come over?" Something in her voice must have alerted him to the seriousness of the situation. "I'm on my way." He arrived 20 minutes later, taking one look at her face and immediately pulling her into his arms. For a moment, Sadie let herself sink into his strength, breathing in his familiar scent and trying to memorize the feeling of being held by him. "What's wrong?" he asked, his hand stroking her hair. Wordlessly, she handed him the photographs and the note. She watched his face as he studied each image, saw his jaw tighten with anger. "They had us followed," he said, his voice carefully controlled. 4 weeks, apparently. "Adrien, the custody hearing has been moved up. If I can't prove that I'm a fit mother, that my children's needs come before everything else. They'll take them," he finished grimly. "Yes." Adrien was quiet for a long moment, his hands still holding the photographs. When he looked up at her, his golden gaze was filled with pain and determination. "Then we stop seeing each other," he said simply. "Adrien." "No, Sadie. This isn't even a choice. Your children are the most important thing in your life, and they should be. I won't be the reason you lose them." "But that's not fair," she said, hating how her voice cracked. "We haven't done anything wrong. We've been careful, discreet." "Not discreet enough, apparently." Adrien's voice was bitter. I should have known better. I should have realized that being with me would put you at risk. This isn't your fault. Isn't it? He gestured to the photographs. I'm the one who pursued you. I'm the one who convinced you to have dinner with me, to let me into your life. I'm the reason they have ammunition against you. Sadie felt tears threatening, but she pushed them back. So what are you saying? I'm saying that I love you too much to let you lose your children because of me. The word love hung in the air between them, the declaration she'd asked him not to make now delivered in the context of goodbye. Adrien, she whispered. I know you asked me not to say it, but I need you to know. I love you, Sadie. I love your children. I love the life we could have together. But I love you enough to walk away if that's what it takes to protect you. What if I don't want you to walk away? Then you're going to have to choose, he said gently. Me or them. And we both know there's only one choice you can make. That afternoon, when Caleb came home from school and found Sadie crying at the kitchen table, her usually composed son sat down beside her with an expression far too mature for his 14 years. It's about Adrien, isn't it? He said. Sadie wiped her eyes, trying to pull herself together. Why would you think that? Because you've been happier the last few weeks than you've been since Dad died. And now you look like someone took that away from you. The observation was so perceptive that Sadie felt fresh tears threaten. Your grandparents, they think my relationship with Adrien makes me an unfit mother. That's stupid, Caleb said with teenage bluntness. Caleb. No, Mom, it is stupid. Adrien makes you smile. He makes Liam laugh and he listens to Amaya talk about art like it actually matters. He's not trying to replace Dad. He's just making us a family again. The court might not see it that way. Then the court is wrong. Caleb's voice was fierce with protective anger. Mom, you deserve to be happy. Dad would want you to be happy. When Amaya and Liam arrived home, they found Sadie and Caleb still sitting at the kitchen table, the photographs spread between them like evidence of a crime. What are those? Amaya asked, her artist's eye immediately drawn to the images. Pictures of us with Adrien, Sadie said carefully. Liam climbed onto her lap, studying the photos with interest. We look happy, he observed. Yes, we do, Sadie agreed. Is that bad? Amaya asked, her 12-year-old intuition picking up on the tension in the room. Some people think it is, Sadie said. What people? Liam demanded with 8-year-old indignation. Sadie exchanged a look with Caleb, who nodded slightly. Her children deserve the truth, age-appropriate but honest. Your grandparents think that I shouldn't have a boyfriend while I'm still taking care of you. They think it means I'm not focused enough on being your mom. But you're still our mom, Liam said, confused. You make our breakfast and help with homework and come to my soccer games. I know, sweetheart. And Adrien doesn't make you not be our mom, Amaya added thoughtfully. He just makes you happier while you're being our mom. What would you do if you had to choose between protecting your children and following your heart? Tell us in the comments, your story might help someone else facing the same impossible choice. The simple wisdom of her children's observations broke something open in Sadie's chest. But knowing they were right didn't make the situation any less impossible. That evening, after the children were in bed, Adrien called. How are they handling it? He asked without preamble. Better than I am, Sadie admitted. They don't understand why loving you would make me a bad mother. Because it doesn't, Adrien said fiercely. Sadie, what we have, what we could have, it's not taking anything away from your children. It's adding to their lives. I know that. You know that. But Catherine and Richard are using our relationship as a weapon against you. Adrien's voice was tight with controlled anger. I keep thinking there has to be something I can do. Some way to fight this. There is, Sadie said quietly. You can stay away from us until after the hearing. The silence on the other end of the line stretched so long that Sadie wondered if he'd hung up. Adrien? I'm here, he said finally. I can't believe we're back here again. Back where? Having to choose between love and everything else. 15 years ago, you chose security over us. Now you're having to choose your children over us. It's not the same thing, Sadie said, though she understood what he meant. Isn't it? Once again, circumstances are forcing us apart. Once again, I have to watch you walk away from what we could have together. This is temporary, she said desperately. Once the custody hearing is over, once the children are safe. Will it be? Adrien asked. Or will there always be something? Another crisis, another reason why we can't be together? The question hung between them, unanswered because Sadie didn't know how to respond. She wanted to promise him that this was temporary, that they would find their way back to each other. But she also knew that her children would always come first, and if protecting them meant sacrificing her own happiness, she would make that choice every time. I need time to think, she said finally. How much time? I don't know. The hearing is next Tuesday. After that, you'll either be free to make your own choices, or you'll have lost your children and nothing else will matter. The stark honesty of his words made her flinch. Adrien. I'm sorry. That was harsh. I can't do this again, Sadie. I can't spend another 15 years waiting for the right moment, hoping that someday the stars will align and we can finally be together. What are you saying? I'm saying that I love you enough to walk away now, to give you the space you need to fight for your children. But I need you to know that if you win this custody battle and then decide that there will always be another reason why we can't be together, I won't wait anymore. The ultimatum hit her like a physical blow. You're asking me to choose. No, Adrien said quietly. I'm telling you that I already have. I choose you, Sadie. All of you, your children, your complications, your impossible situation. I choose the chaos and the uncertainty and the uphill battle because I'd rather fight for a life with you than live peacefully without you. But I need to know that you choose me too. I do choose you, she said desperately. But. There's always a but, Adrien said sadly. And maybe that's my answer. After he hung up, Sadie sat in her quiet house, surrounded by the life she'd built for her children, and wondered if choosing to protect them meant choosing to be alone forever. The photographs were still scattered across her kitchen counter, evidence of a happiness that had felt real and possible just hours ago. She picked up one of the images, Adrien lifting Liam onto his shoulders while she watched with undisguised love, and tried to see it through Catherine and Richard's eyes. Did it look like a woman who was prioritizing romance over responsibility? Or did it look like a family healing, growing, learning to love again? The answer, she realized, depended entirely on who was looking. And unfortunately, the people who would be looking were the ones who had already decided she wasn't worthy of keeping her children. Part 6. The custody hearing was scheduled for 10 in the morning on a Tuesday that dawned gray and drizzling, as if the weather itself was reflecting Sadie's mood. She had spent the weekend in a state of controlled panic, preparing testimony with Elena while trying to maintain normalcy for her children. Adrien had kept his word about staying away, but his absence felt like a physical ache. No good morning texts, no surprise appearances at soccer practice, no warm presence in her kitchen while she cooked dinner. The house felt emptier without him, and even the children had commented on the change. "Where's Adrien?" Liam had asked the night before, his 8-year-old directness cutting straight to the heart of the matter. "He's busy with work," Sadie had said, the lie tasting bitter on her tongue. "Will he come to my game on Saturday?" "I don't know, sweetheart." Now, sitting in the family court waiting room with Elena, Sadie tried to prepare herself for what was coming. Across the room, Catherine and Richard Jackson sat with their attorney, a sharp-faced woman in an expensive suit who looked like she collected custody victories for sport. "Remember," Elena whispered, "stay calm, answer only what's asked, and don't let them bait you into saying anything that could be twisted. What if they ask about Adrien? Tell the truth. You were friends, you developed feelings, you're not currently in a relationship because you're prioritizing your children's needs during this difficult time." The words felt like betrayal, even though they were technically accurate. She and Adrien weren't currently in a relationship, because she'd chosen her children's safety over her own happiness. Again. "Mrs. Jackson?" The bailiff called her name, and Sadie felt her stomach lurch. The hearing room was smaller than she'd expected, with fluorescent lighting that made everyone look pale and tired. The judge, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes and steel-gray hair, reviewed the files before her with careful attention. "This is a motion for emergency custody modification," Judge Morrison said, looking over her reading glasses at the assembled parties. "Mrs. Catherine Jackson and Mr. Richard Jackson are seeking primary custody of 3 minor children currently in the care of their daughter-in-law, Mrs. Sadie Jackson." "Mrs. Jackson, you understand the nature of these proceedings?" "Yes, Your Honor," Sadie managed. "Mrs. Collins, you may proceed with your client's defense." Elena stood, her composure professional and reassuring. "Your Honor, Mrs. Sadie Jackson is a devoted mother who has provided stable, loving care for her 3 children following the tragic death of her husband 2 years ago. The children are thriving academically, socially, and emotionally under her care. This motion appears to be motivated not by genuine concern for the children's welfare, but by a desire to control Mrs. Jackson's personal life." Catherine's attorney, Ms. Richmond, was on her feet immediately. "Your Honor, our clients are deeply concerned about the children's welfare. Mrs. Jackson has been engaging in inappropriate relationships while still grieving her husband's death, exposing the children to unstable situations and questionable moral influences. The photographs were entered into evidence, each image a knife twist in Sadie's chest." She watched the judge study them, trying to read the woman's expression. "Mrs. Jackson," Judge Morrison said, "can you tell me about your relationship with Mr. Adrien Carter?" Sadie stood, her legs feeling unsteady. "Adrien and I knew each other in college, Your Honor. He moved back to town recently and we reconnected. He's been a friend." "A friend who kisses you on your front porch?" Ms. Richmond interjected. "Counselor," Judge Morrison warned, "let the witness answer." "Adrien has been supportive during a difficult time," Sadie continued. "My children like him, and he's been a positive influence in their lives." "Positive influence?" Ms. Richmond's voice dripped skepticism. "Your Honor, Mr. Carter is a wealthy businessman who has been essentially buying Mrs. Jackson's affection with expensive gifts and experiences. This is hardly the stable, appropriate relationship that should be modeled for grieving children." "That's not true," Sadie said, her composure cracking slightly. "Adrien has never tried to buy anything. He's been kind, supportive. He's been living in your home?" "No." "Spending nights there?" "No." "But he has been present during intimate family moments, correct? Bedtime routines, homework help, disciplinary decisions?" Sadie hesitated, seeing the trap. "He's helped with homework occasionally, when he was visiting. Visiting frequently enough that your children have formed attachments to him. Attachments that will be severed when this relationship inevitably ends, causing them further trauma and loss." "Your Honor," Elena interjected, "there's no evidence that." "The evidence," Ms. Richmond continued, "is that Mrs. Jackson has prioritized her romantic fulfillment over her children's emotional stability. She has exposed them to a relationship that may or may not be permanent, forcing them to process not only their father's death but also the confusion of their mother's dating life." Sadie felt the walls closing in around her. Every word was a twisted version of the truth, but she could see how it might look to an outside observer. A widow who should be focused solely on her children, distracted by romance and the attention of a wealthy man. "Mrs. Jackson," Judge Morrison said gently, how do your children feel about Mr. Carter? They like him, Sadie said honestly. He's patient with them, kind. He listens to them. And how do you feel about him? The question hung in the air, loaded with implications. Sadie looked at Elena, who nodded slightly. I care about him, she said quietly. Very much. Enough to prioritize that relationship over your children's needs? No, Sadie said firmly. Never. My children come first, always. Then why haven't you ended the relationship, if you understand it's putting their custody at risk? The question was like a scalpel, cutting straight to the heart of her dilemma. We're not currently seeing each other. Because of this situation. So you have ended it? Temporarily. Until after these proceedings? I don't know, Sadie admitted, and she could feel the admission hanging in the air like a confession of guilt. Richard took the stand next, his testimony a carefully orchestrated attack on Sadie's character and judgment. He spoke about Michael's concerns about Sadie's restlessness in the final years of their marriage, about her desire to return to work when she should have been focused on home and family. Michael worried that Sadie felt trapped by motherhood, Richard said, his voice heavy with manufactured concern. He mentioned that she sometimes seemed resentful of the sacrifices she'd made for the children. It was a masterful distortion of private conversations, turning normal marital discussions into evidence of maternal inadequacy. Sadie felt sick listening to her late husband's words being weaponized against her. Catherine's testimony was even more damaging. She spoke about the children's behavioral changes since Michael's death, their academic struggles, their emotional volatility. She painted a picture of a woman overwhelmed by single motherhood, seeking escape in an inappropriate relationship with a man who represented everything her late son had provided: wealth, status, security. The children need stability, Catherine concluded, dabbing at her eyes with a lace handkerchief. They need the resources and opportunities that Richard and I can provide. They need to be protected from further emotional upheaval. When it was time for Sadie to present her defense, Elena called character witnesses, teachers who spoke about the children's progress, neighbors who testified to Sadie's devotion, family friends who had witnessed her strength throughout the grieving process. But Sadie could feel the tide turning against her. Every positive testimony was countered by questions about her relationship with Adrien, about her judgment, about her priorities. Then Elena called her final witness. Your Honor, I'd like to call Mr. Adrien Carter to the stand. Sadie's head snapped up in shock. Adrien was supposed to stay away, to avoid any appearance of involvement in the proceedings. But there he was, walking through the courtroom doors in a dark suit, his amber eyes finding hers across the room. Mr. Carter, Elena began, what is your relationship to Mrs. Jackson? I'm someone who loves her, Adrien said simply, and Sadie felt her heart stop. Someone who has loved her for 15 years and will continue to love her regardless of what happens in this courtroom today. Ms. Richmond was on her feet immediately. Your Honor, Mr. Carter's presence here proves exactly what we've been saying. Mrs. Jackson cannot prioritize her children's welfare over her romantic entanglements. If I may, Adrien said, his voice calm but carrying an authority that filled the room. I'm here because I believe this court should hear the truth about what kind of mother Sadie Jackson is. Judge Morrison gestured for him to continue. I've watched Mrs. Jackson with her children, Adrien said. I've seen her sacrifice her own comfort for theirs, put their needs before her own in every single decision. I've seen her work with Caleb on homework until midnight because he was struggling with math. I've seen her sit with Amaya for hours, just listening while her daughter processed her grief through art. I've seen her wake up at 5 in the morning to make Liam's favorite breakfast before a big game because she knew it would make him feel confident. His voice grew stronger, more passionate. I've also seen her cry in her kitchen after the children were asleep, not because she was unhappy with her life, but because she was so tired and overwhelmed and afraid she wasn't doing enough for them. I've seen her turn down every invitation, every opportunity for her own happiness, because she thought it might take something away from her children. Sadie felt tears streaming down her face as Adrien continued. Your Honor, if loving someone who is that devoted to her children makes me a negative influence, then I accept that judgment. But I will not sit by and watch this court punish an extraordinary mother for the crime of allowing herself to feel hope again. Mr. Carter, Ms. Richmond said sharply, isn't it true that you've been essentially courting Mrs. Jackson with expensive gifts and experiences that she couldn't otherwise provide for her children? I've brought flowers, Adrien said evenly. I've cooked dinner. I've attended soccer games. If those are expensive gifts, then yes, I'm guilty. You're a wealthy man, Mr. Carter. Surely you can see how your resources might be influencing Mrs. Jackson's feelings toward you? Adrien's smile was sharp. Counselor, are you suggesting that Sadie Jackson is so mercenary that she would fake affection for financial gain? Because if you knew her at all, you'd realize how insulting that question is. I'm suggesting that a struggling single mother might be vulnerable to the security you represent. Then you don't know Sadie Jackson, Adrien said firmly. She turned down my marriage proposal 15 years ago when I had nothing but potential and dreams. She chose stability and security with her husband, a choice I respected then and respect now. The idea that she would be with me for money is not only false, it's insulting to everything she is as a person. The courtroom fell silent. Sadie stared at Adrien, processing what he'd just revealed. He had proposed 15 years ago. She had no memory of a proposal, only of the painful conversation where they decided to go their separate ways. Mr. Carter, Judge Morrison said carefully, you proposed to Mrs. Jackson in college? Adrien's eyes found Sadie's across the courtroom. The night before graduation. I had a ring and everything. I asked her to marry me and come to California. She said no because she thought I deserved someone who could follow me anywhere, and she needed to stay close to home. And now? Now I know that home isn't a place. It's her. It's those 3 beautiful children who call her mom. It's the life she's built through love and sacrifice and sheer determination. Adrien turned to face the judge directly. Your Honor, I want to marry Sadie Jackson. I want to adopt her children and give them my name if they'll have it. I want to be the father figure they deserve and the husband she deserves. But more than that, I want them to stay together as a family, because separating them would be the cruelest thing anyone could do to 4 people who have already lost so much. The silence in the courtroom was deafening. Sadie felt like she couldn't breathe, like the world had tilted off its axis. Adrien had just proposed to her in front of a judge, her children's grandparents, and a room full of strangers. Ms. Richmond recovered first. Your Honor, this is exactly what we've been talking about. Mr. Carter is making grand romantic gestures in a courtroom, turning these proceedings into a circus. This is not the stable, appropriate environment these children need. Actually, Judge Morrison said dryly, Mr. Carter is the first person in this courtroom who has spoken primarily about the children's needs rather than adult grievances. Mr. Carter, do the children know about your feelings for their mother? Yes, Your Honor. We've been honest with them about our relationship. And how do they feel about the possibility of you becoming a permanent part of their family? Adrien smiled for the first time since entering the courtroom. Liam asked me if I'd teach him to drive when he's old enough. Amaya wants to paint a portrait of our family. And Caleb. Adrien's voice softened. Caleb told me that his dad would approve of me because I make his mom laugh. Judge Morrison made notes, her expression thoughtful. Mrs. Jackson, how do you respond to Mr. Carter's statements? Sadie stood on unsteady legs, her heart pounding. Your Honor, I love him. I love him desperately, and I have for 15 years. But I will not sacrifice my children's welfare for my own happiness. If being with Adrien means losing them, then there's no choice to make. And if you could have both? If you could marry Mr. Carter and keep your children? That would be. Sadie's voice broke. That would be everything I've ever wanted but was afraid to hope for. After a brief recess, Judge Morrison returned with her decision. Sadie sat between Elena and Adrien, who had taken the seat beside her during the break. His hand found hers under the table, and she gripped it like a lifeline. This case has required me to examine what constitutes the best interests of 3 children who have already experienced significant trauma and loss, Judge Morrison began. I've heard testimony about Mrs. Jackson's character, her parenting abilities, and her relationship with Mr. Carter. Sadie held her breath. While the petitioners raise valid concerns about stability and the potential impact of new relationships on grieving children, I find their arguments fundamentally flawed. The evidence shows that Mrs. Jackson's children are thriving under her care. Their academic performance, while impacted by their father's death, has improved significantly over the past year. Their emotional health, as testified by their teachers and counselors, shows steady progress toward healing. Sadie felt tears of relief starting to build. Furthermore, I find that Mr. Carter's presence in their lives has been beneficial rather than harmful. The children have testified, through their guardian ad litem, that they feel happier and more secure when Mr. Carter is part of their daily routine. They have expressed, in age-appropriate ways, that they would welcome him as a stepfather. Catherine's sharp intake of breath was audible across the courtroom. Most importantly, I find that Mrs. Jackson has consistently demonstrated that her children's welfare comes before her own desires. Her willingness to end her relationship with Mr. Carter to protect their custody shows exactly the kind of maternal devotion these children need. Judge Morrison looked directly at Sadie. Mrs. Jackson, the motion for custody modification is denied. Your children will remain in your care, where they clearly belong. The courtroom erupted. Catherine was on her feet, arguing with her attorney. Richard's face was flushed with anger. But Sadie could only focus on Adrien's hand squeezing hers, on the relief flooding through her body like warm water. However, Judge Morrison continued, waiting for quiet, I want to address the underlying issues that brought us here today. Mrs. Jackson, you have every right to pursue happiness and companionship. Your children need to see that their mother is a whole person with her own needs and desires. Modeling healthy relationships will serve them well as they grow up. She turned to Catherine and Richard. Mr. and Mrs. Jackson, your love for your grandchildren is evident. But love does not give you the right to control their mother's life or use the court system to enforce your personal disapproval of her choices. I strongly encourage you to work toward a relationship with Mrs. Jackson that supports her role as their mother rather than undermining it. As the proceedings concluded and people began filing out of the courtroom, Adrien pulled Sadie into his arms right there in front of everyone. We won, he whispered against her hair. We won, she repeated, hardly daring to believe it. Sadie, he said, pulling back to look at her face. I meant what I said in there. About wanting to marry you, about wanting to adopt the children. I know it's overwhelming, and I know we need to take things slow, but... She silenced him with a kiss, pouring all her relief and love and gratitude into the contact. When they broke apart, both were breathing hard. Yes, she said simply. Yes? Yes to all of it. Yes to marriage, yes to adoption, yes to the life we should have had 15 years ago. She cupped his face in her hands. Yes to finally choosing love. That evening, Adrien joined them for dinner at Sadie's house, their house, she corrected herself. As they sat around the table, Liam chattering about his day, Amaya sketching in her notebook between bites, and Caleb actually smiling, Sadie felt a peace she hadn't experienced in years. So, Caleb said during a lull in conversation, are you guys getting married? Would that be okay with you? Adrien asked seriously. Yeah, Caleb said, then added with teenage awkwardness, I mean, if it makes Mom happy. It makes me very happy, Sadie said, reaching across the table to squeeze her son's hand. Can I be the flower girl? Amaya asked. Can I walk you down the aisle, Mom? Liam chimed in. Looking around the table at her children, their children, Sadie felt her eyes fill with tears of joy rather than sorrow for the first time in 2 years. "You can all be whatever you want to be," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "As long as we're together." Later that night, after the children were in bed, Sadie and Adrien stood on her front porch, the same porch where they'd shared their first kiss just weeks ago. "I can't believe you proposed to me in a courtroom," she said, laughing despite herself. "I can't believe it took me 15 years to get the answer I wanted," Adrien replied, pulling her closer. "Adrien, about college, why didn't you tell me you had proposed?" "I don't remember." "Because you were crying," he said gently. "You were so torn up about choosing between me and Michael, between following your heart and doing what felt safe. I was going to ask you to marry me, but when I saw how much pain the decision was causing you, I couldn't add to it." The night before graduation, Adrien had stood in her dorm room with a small velvet box hidden in his jacket pocket, ready to ask her to marry him and build a life together in California. But seeing her tears, her anguish over the impossible choice, he'd quietly slipped the ring back into his pocket and simply held her instead, letting her believe the decision was entirely hers to make. "So you let me think you were okay with us ending things." "I was never okay with it. But I loved you enough to let you make the choice you needed to make." Sadie felt her heart break a little for the young man who had sacrificed his own happiness to spare her additional pain. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "Don't be. Everything that happened led us here, to this moment, to this family. I wouldn't change any of it." As they kissed under the porch light, Sadie realized that some love stories didn't follow traditional timelines. Some hearts had to break and heal and break again before they found their way home. Some happily ever afters required decades of patience and growth and second chances. But when they finally arrived, they were worth every moment of waiting. Part 7. 3 months after the custody hearing, Sadie stood in front of her bedroom mirror, adjusting the simple white dress she'd chosen for their intimate wedding ceremony. Through her window, she could see Adrien in the backyard with James, setting up chairs under the oak tree where they decided to exchange vows. The past 3 months had been a whirlwind of healing and growth. Catherine and Richard had finally accepted the court's decision, though their relationship remained strained. They saw the children every other weekend, but the visits were now supervised and structured, focused on building positive memories rather than undermining Sadie's authority. "Mom, you look beautiful," Amaya said from the doorway, holding a bouquet of sunflowers that she and Adrien had picked that morning. "Thank you, sweetheart." Sadie turned to face her daughter, marveling at how much more relaxed and happy Amaya seemed these days. The nightmares had stopped, and her artwork had taken on brighter, more hopeful themes. "Are you nervous?" Caleb asked, appearing behind his sister. At 14, he was trying to project sophisticated nonchalance, but Sadie could see the excitement in his eyes. "A little," she admitted. "Good nervous, though." "Dad would be happy for you," Caleb said suddenly, and Sadie felt her eyes fill with tears. "You think so?" "I know so. He always said he wanted you to be happy, even if something happened to him." The conversation was interrupted by Liam bursting into the room, wearing his new suit and a grin that stretched from ear to ear. "Adrien said it's almost time. And guess what? He said after the wedding I can call him Papa Adrien or just Papa or Dad or whatever feels right." Sadie knelt down to straighten Liam's tie, her heart full to overflowing. "What do you think you'll call him?" "Papa," Liam said decisively. "Because Dad was Dad, but Papa is different. Papa is for now." The simple wisdom of her 8-year-old son never ceased to amaze her. Papa was for now, a perfect way to honor Michael's memory while embracing their new reality. Elena appeared in the doorway, resplendent in her role as matron of honor. "Ready, beautiful?" "Ready," Sadie said, and meant it. The ceremony was small but perfect. 20 guests gathered under the oak tree, including some of Michael's friends who had embraced Adrien with surprising warmth. As Sadie walked down the makeshift aisle between the chairs, her children beside her, she felt Michael's presence not as a shadow of the past but as a blessing on their future. Adrien stood waiting for her in a charcoal gray suit, his golden gaze bright with unshed tears. When she reached him, he took her hands and whispered, "You're beautiful." "So are you," she whispered back. The ceremony was conducted by Elena's uncle, a retired minister who had known Sadie since childhood. His words were simple but profound, speaking about second chances, blended families, and the courage it took to love again after loss. "Do you, Adrien, take Sadie to be your wife, and do you promise to love and cherish not only her but the children she brings to this marriage?" "I do," Adrien said, his voice strong and sure. "I promise to love Sadie with everything I am, and to be the father that Caleb, Amaya, and Liam deserve. I promise to honor Michael's memory while creating new memories of our own." "And do you, Sadie, take Adrien to be your husband, trusting him with your heart and the hearts of your children?" "I do," Sadie said, tears flowing freely now. "I promise to love you with the wisdom that comes from loss and the joy that comes from healing. I promise to build a life with you that honors our past while embracing our future." When Adrien slipped the ring onto her finger, a simple platinum band with 3 small diamonds representing her children, Sadie felt something inside her chest that had been broken for 2 years finally click back into place. "You may kiss your bride," the minister said with a smile. The kiss was tender and sweet, witnessed by their children and friends under the canopy of green leaves. When they broke apart, Liam's voice rang out clearly. "Now are we officially a family?" "We've been a family since the first night you taught Adrien to play video games," Sadie said, laughing through her tears. The reception was held in Adrien's backyard, their backyard now, with twinkling lights strung between the trees and a cake that Amaya had helped design. As the evening settled around them, Sadie found herself standing apart from the festivities for a moment, watching her new husband dance with her daughter while Caleb and Liam played an impromptu game of soccer with some of the guests. "Penny for your thoughts," Elena said, joining her at the edge of the patio. "I was just thinking about how different this is from my first wedding," Sadie said. "That was all about the future we were planning, the life we were going to build. This feels like coming home. Because you're not just marrying a man this time. You're choosing a life that already fits." "Exactly." Sadie watched as Adrien spun Amaya around, both of them laughing. "He doesn't just love me. He loves us." The whole messy, complicated, beautiful package. Later, after the guests had gone home and the children were in bed, Sadie and Adrien found themselves alone in their bedroom for the first time as husband and wife. The space had been transformed over the past month as Adrien gradually moved his belongings in, but tonight it felt different. Tonight it was truly theirs. "Mrs. Carter," Adrien said, pulling her into his arms. "I love the sound of that," she admitted, then paused. "Should the children change their names too?" "Only if they want to," Adrien said seriously. "They're Jacksons, and that's important. But if someday they decide they want to be Carters too, that would make me proud. Caleb mentioned it to me last week. He said it might be nice to have the same last name as his little brother or sister." Adrien's eyes widened. "Little brother or sister?" Sadie smiled, enjoying his surprise. "I'm not pregnant yet. But I'd like to be. If you want that too." "Sadie," Adrien said, his voice thick with emotion, "I want everything with you. Babies, teenagers, toddlers having meltdowns in grocery stores, late nights helping with homework, soccer games in the rain. I want it all. Even the sleepless nights and diaper changes. Especially those." His hands framed her face, thumbs brushing away tears she didn't realize had fallen. "I've waited 39 years to be a father. I'm ready for everything that comes with it." The kiss that followed was different from all the others they'd shared. It wasn't charged with the desperate need they'd felt before the custody hearing, or sweet with the relief that had followed their victory in court. This kiss was full of promise and permanence, the kiss of two people who finally, completely belonged to each other. "Adrien, Sadie whispered against his lips, "Make love to me. Not as the woman you've been waiting for, but as your wife." "My wife," he repeated wonderingly, as if testing the words. "My beautiful, amazing wife." What followed was a tender, passionate joining that sealed their commitment in the most intimate way possible. In the soft darkness of their bedroom, surrounded by the quiet sounds of their sleeping children down the hall, Sadie and Adrien came together not just as lovers but as partners, as parents, as people who had found their way home to each other after 15 years of separation. Afterward, as they lay entwined in the moonlight streaming through their window, Adrien traced lazy patterns on Sadie's bare shoulder. "I have something for you," he said quietly. "More than this?" she asked, gesturing to encompass their new life, their blended family, their hard-won happiness. "A wedding gift." He reached into the nightstand drawer and pulled out a small wrapped box. Inside was a locket, antique silver with delicate engraving. When Sadie opened it, she found a picture of Michael on one side and a photo of Adrien with her children on the other. "Adrien," she breathed, unable to find words. "I wanted you to know that I understand," he said softly. "Michael will always be part of our family. He gave you those beautiful children, and he loved you well enough to make you who you are today. I'm not replacing him. I'm adding to what he started." The thoughtfulness of the gift, the profound understanding it represented, broke something open in Sadie's chest. She had married a man who not only accepted her past but honored it, who saw her late husband not as competition but as someone to be grateful to. "I love you," she said, the words inadequate for the depth of feeling coursing through her. "I love you so much it terrifies me." "Don't be terrified," Adrien said, pulling her closer. "Be happy. We've earned it." 6 months later, Sadie stood in the same spot where she'd gotten married, but this time she was holding a pregnancy test with 2 pink lines. Adrien found her there, staring at the positive result with a mixture of joy and disbelief. "Really?" he asked, his voice full of wonder. "Really," she confirmed, launching herself into his arms. Their children took the news with varying degrees of excitement. Liam was thrilled at the prospect of being a big brother. Amaya immediately began planning nursery decorations. Caleb, ever the teenager, rolled his eyes but couldn't hide his smile when he thought no one was looking. "Will you love the new baby more than us?" Liam asked one evening as they all sat around the dinner table discussing baby names. "Oh, sweetheart," Sadie said, pulling him onto her lap despite his protests that he was too big. "Love doesn't work like that. Having a new baby doesn't take away any of the love I have for you. It just makes my heart bigger. Like how Papa doesn't love you less because he loves us too?" Amaya asked with the insight that constantly amazed Sadie. "Exactly like that," Adrien confirmed, reaching across the table to squeeze Amaya's hand. 9 months later, Sophia Catherine Carter, named for wisdom and the grandmother who had finally learned to accept their unconventional family, was born into a house full of love. Catherine and Richard, who had gradually softened in their stance, were invited to meet their new granddaughter, and for the first time since Michael's death, the family felt complete. As Sadie nursed her daughter in the rocking chair that Adrien had built himself, she marveled at the journey that had brought them to this moment. From the desperate widow fighting for her children's custody to a woman surrounded by love in all its forms, it felt like a miracle. "What are you thinking about?" Adrien asked from the doorway, where he stood watching his wife and daughter with infinite tenderness. "About how different my life is from what I thought it would be," she said softly, not wanting to wake Sophia. 2 years ago, I thought my story was over. I thought the best I could hope for was to survive each day for my children's sake. And now? Now I know that some stories have multiple chapters. The love I had with Michael was real and beautiful and it gave me these amazing children. But that doesn't mean it was the only love I was allowed to have." Adrien crossed the room and settled onto the arm of the rocking chair, his hand stroking Sophia's downy head. "I used to think I was waiting for my life to begin. Waiting for you to be ready, waiting for the right time, waiting for permission to be happy. But I understand now that life isn't something you wait for. It's something you choose, every single day. And what do you choose? Sadie asked, though she already knew the answer. I choose this, he said, gesturing to encompass their sleeping daughter, the sounds of their other children getting ready for bed, the life they'd built together. I choose you, I choose them, I choose us. Every day, for the rest of my life. As they sat together in the peaceful darkness, their newest child contentment between them while their other children settled into sleep down the hall, Sadie felt a deep sense of gratitude wash over her. Some love stories, she realized, were worth waiting 15 years for. Some families were built not just through blood but through choice, through commitment, through the courage to love again after loss. Some happily ever afters came not at the end of the story, but in the middle, when you finally understood that the best chapters were still to come. I love you, Adrien Carter, she whispered into the darkness. I love you too, Sadie Carter, he whispered back. Today, tomorrow, and for all the tomorrows after that. And in that moment, surrounded by the family they'd created together, Sadie knew that some promises were meant to last forever. Part 8. 2 years after their wedding, Sadie Carter stood in her kitchen, the same kitchen where she'd once cried alone into her coffee, wondering how she would survive single motherhood, and marveled at the transformation. The space buzzed with the controlled chaos of a family of 6. Caleb, now 16, was helping 10-year-old Liam with algebra at the breakfast bar while Amaya, 14 and increasingly artistic, sketched at the table with 2-year-old Sophia giggling on her lap. Adrien stood at the stove, making his famous pancakes for Sunday morning breakfast, while their newest addition, 3-month-old Michael Adrien Carter, slept peacefully in the carrier strapped to his chest. They had named their son after Sadie's late husband and Adrien's father, a gesture that had brought both families to tears and finally, completely healed the rift with Catherine and Richard. Mom! Liam called out, frustrated with his homework. This doesn't make sense. What doesn't make sense? Sadie asked, moving to look over his shoulder while bouncing baby Michael gently. Why do I need to know algebra? When am I ever going to use this in real life? Every time you calculate how much allowance you need to save for that video game you want, Caleb said with the superior wisdom of 16. Or when you're helping Dad figure out measurements for his projects. Papa's teaching me about compound interest too, Liam said, brightening. He says if I save my allowance and put it in an investment account, by the time I'm 18 I'll have enough money for college. Sadie exchanged a smile with Adrien over their son's head. In the 2 years since their marriage, Adrien had not only embraced fatherhood but excelled at it. He attended every soccer game, school play, and parent-teacher conference. He'd learned to braid Amaya's hair for dance recitals and stayed up until midnight helping Caleb prepare for his driver's license test. Speaking of college, Adrien said, flipping pancakes with practiced ease, we got some good news yesterday. What kind of good news? Caleb asked, looking up from Liam's homework. Your scholarship application to the summer art program at the university was accepted, Adrien said to Amaya, whose face lit up with joy. Really? The one where I get to work with actual professional artists? The very one. Full scholarship, thanks to that portfolio you've been working on. Amaya jumped up, careful not to disturb Sophia, and threw her arms around Adrien's waist. Thank you, Papa. I never would have applied if you hadn't encouraged me. You earned it, sweetheart. Your talent did all the work. Watching her daughter's happiness, Sadie felt the familiar surge of gratitude that had become a constant in her life. Adrien hadn't just married her, he'd embraced every aspect of their blended family with enthusiasm and dedication that still took her breath away. Mom, Sophia said suddenly, tugging on Sadie's shirt with chubby fingers. Hungry. Breakfast is almost ready, baby girl, Sadie said, kissing her daughter's dark curls. At 2, Sophia was the perfect blend of both parents, Adrien's amber eyes and Sadie's warm complexion, with a personality that was pure sunshine. I help Papa cook? Sophia asked hopefully, her words still endearingly imperfect. "After breakfast, you can help me make cookies," Adrien promised, and Sophia clapped her hands with delight. As they gathered around the expanded dining table that Adrien had built himself to accommodate their growing family, Sadie looked around at the faces surrounding her and felt her heart overflow with contentment. Caleb was telling a story about his girlfriend, Maya, whom he'd met in AP History. Amaya was sketching the family scene even as she ate. Liam was already planning his strategy for the soccer game that afternoon. Sophia was making a happy mess with her cut-up pancakes. And baby Michael slept peacefully in Adrien's arms, completely secure in his place in this loud, loving family. "What are you thinking about?" Adrien asked softly, noticing her contemplative expression. "Just, all of this," she said, gesturing around the table. "Sometimes I can't believe this is my life." "Our life," Adrien corrected gently. "Our life," she agreed, the word "our" still giving her a thrill even after 2 years of marriage. After breakfast, while the older children scattered to their various weekend activities and Sophia napped, Sadie and Adrien found themselves alone in the living room with baby Michael. These quiet moments were precious and rare in their busy household. "I got a call from Elena yesterday," Sadie said as she settled beside Adrien on the couch, Michael content in her arms. "Good news or lawyer news?" "Good news. Catherine and Richard want to take the kids to Disney World this summer. All of them, including Sophia and Michael." Adrien's eyebrows rose in surprise. "That's a significant step." "It really is. Richard actually asked if you and I wanted to come too, make it a family vacation." "And what did you tell Elena to tell them?" "That we'd think about it." "But Adrien, the fact that they're including our babies, that they want us there too, it feels like we've finally become a real family in their eyes." "We've always been a real family," Adrien said firmly. "But I'm glad they're finally seeing it." The journey to this point hadn't been easy. The first year of their marriage had required careful navigation as everyone adjusted to new roles and relationships. Catherine and Richard had struggled to accept that their grandchildren could love Adrien without betraying Michael's memory. Caleb had gone through a difficult period of testing boundaries, pushing back against Adrien's authority while simultaneously craving the stability he provided. But slowly, steadily, they had built something beautiful together. Adrien never tried to replace Michael in the children's hearts, but he carved out his own space with patience and consistency. He learned each child's love language, quality time with Caleb, words of affirmation with Amaya, physical affection with Liam, and he showed up for them day after day until they stopped questioning whether he would stay. "I was thinking," Adrien said, shifting Michael to his shoulder for burping, "about what Caleb said last week. About wanting to change his name to Carter before he graduates." "You don't have to adopt them officially, you know," Sadie said gently. "You're already their father in every way that matters." "I know. But if it's something they want, something that would make them feel more secure." "They know you're not going anywhere, Adrien. Caleb bringing it up isn't about security. It's about pride. He wants to share your name because he's proud to be your son." The words clearly affected Adrien deeply. His eyes grew bright with unshed tears as he processed what Sadie was telling him. "All 3 of them have asked about it at different times," she continued. "And I think Michael would be happy about it. He always worried about what would happen to them if something happened to him. Knowing they have a father who loves them this much, it would give him peace." "You really think so?" "I know so." Sadie leaned over to kiss his cheek. "You've given them something Michael never could, the experience of choosing their family. They don't love you because they have to. They love you because of who you are, how you treat them, how you make them feel safe and valued and heard." That afternoon, at Liam's soccer game, Sadie watched from the sidelines as Adrien cheered enthusiastically for their son. Caleb sat beside them, holding Sophia while she clapped along to the crowd's energy. Amaya was sketching the scene, capturing the joy and togetherness that had become their family's signature. Mama. Sophia said suddenly, pointing toward the field where Liam had just scored a goal. Liam fast. Very fast, Sadie agreed, laughing as Adrien jumped up to cheer louder than anyone else in the stands. After the game, as they gathered their things and prepared to head home, Liam ran over to them, still flushed with victory and excitement. "Did you see that goal, Papa?" he asked breathlessly. "I saw it. That was incredible. I'm so proud of you." Adrien pulled Liam into a hug that lifted the 10-year-old off his feet, and Sadie felt her chest tighten with emotion. Watching Adrien with her children never got old. Every time he called them "my kids," or included them naturally in his future plans, every time he put their needs before his own comfort, every time he showed up exactly when they needed him most, it reinforced what she'd known from the beginning. He was meant to be their father. "Can we get ice cream to celebrate?" Liam asked hopefully. "Absolutely," Adrien said without hesitation. "Victory ice cream is mandatory." As they piled into their SUV, another practical purchase that spoke to how completely Adrien had embraced family life, Sadie reflected on how much their lives had changed. 2 years ago, she'd been fighting just to keep her children. Now she was part of a family that was growing and thriving and full of joy. "Hey," Adrien said quietly as they drove toward the ice cream shop, reaching over to take her hand. "What's that look?" "What look?" "The one that means you're thinking deep thoughts." "Just grateful," she said simply. "For all of this. For you. For second chances. For ice cream." Sophia chimed in from her car seat, making everyone laugh. "For ice cream," Sadie agreed solemnly. "Definitely for ice cream." That evening, after the children were in bed and the house had settled into peaceful quiet, Sadie and Adrien sat on their back porch, baby Michael sleeping between them in his carrier. The garden that Adrien had lovingly tended bloomed around them, filling the night air with the scent of jasmine and roses. "I got an offer today," Adrien said quietly. "What kind of offer?" "To sell the company. The offer is substantial. Life-changing substantial." Sadie turned to study his face in the porch light. And I'm going to turn it down." "Why?" "Because I don't want my life to change," he said simply. "I like our life exactly as it is. I like being here for school plays and soccer games and midnight feedings. I like having dinner with our family every night and helping with homework and reading bedtime stories. I don't want to be the guy who travels constantly or works 18-hour days chasing the next big deal. Even if it means missing out on millions of dollars." "Sadie, I already have everything money can't buy. I have you, I have our children, I have this." He gestured to encompass their home, their family, their life together. "Why would I trade any of that for more money?" The answer was so perfectly Adrien, choosing love over ambition, family over fortune, presence over prestige, that Sadie felt her eyes fill with tears. "You know what I love most about you," she said, moving closer to him on the porch swing. "Tell me. You never make me choose between being loved and being myself. Michael loved me, but he loved the version of me that fit into his vision of what a wife and mother should be. You love me exactly as I am, messy and complicated and sometimes too emotional and sometimes too practical. Because that's who you are," Adrien said, wrapping his arm around her shoulders. "And who you are is extraordinary." "I've been thinking about going back to school," she said, testing the waters of a dream she'd been nurturing quietly for months. "Tell me more." "A master's in counseling. Family therapy, specifically. Working with children who've experienced loss, helping families blend and heal." She paused, then added more quietly, "I know it would mean less time at home, more pressure on you with the kids." "Sadie," Adrien interrupted gently, "stop. If that's what you want to do, then we'll make it work. Elena's been telling me for months that you'd be incredible at that. You've talked to Elena about this? She mentioned that you'd brought it up to her." And I agree with her completely. You have a gift for helping people heal, for seeing what families need to thrive. Look at what you've done with us. You took 3 grieving children and a man who'd never learned how to be part of a family, and you created something beautiful. We created something beautiful, she corrected. Then let's create something else beautiful. Let's support each other's dreams the way we support our children's dreams. As if summoned by the mention of dreams, Sophia appeared in the doorway, her hair tousled from sleep and her favorite stuffed elephant clutched in her arms. Mama? Papa? Why you outside? Just talking, baby girl, Sadie said, opening her arms. Come here. Sophia climbed onto the porch swing between them, settling contentedly against Sadie's side while Adrien wrapped his arm around both of them. Talk about what? Sophia asked with 2-year-old curiosity. About how much we love our family, Adrien said, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. I love family too, Sophia declared with the simple certainty of childhood. Love Mama and Papa and Caleb and Maya and Liam and baby Michael and Nana Elena and Grandma Catherine and Grandpa Richard and everybody. That's a lot of love, Sadie observed. Big love, Sophia agreed seriously, then yawned and snuggled deeper into the warm circle of her parents' arms. As they sat together on the porch swing, 3 generations of their family peaceful in the quiet night, Sadie felt a deep sense of completion wash over her. This was what happiness looked like, not grand gestures or perfect moments, but the simple contentment of being exactly where you belonged with exactly the people who mattered most. Adrien, she said softly, not wanting to wake Sophia, who had drifted back to sleep between them. Thank you. For what? For seeing me. For choosing us. For proving that some love stories are worth waiting for. Thank you for letting me love you, he replied. For trusting me with your heart and your children's hearts. For making me a father, a husband, a better man than I ever thought I could be. From inside the house came the soft cry of baby Michael waking for his late-night feeding. Without hesitation, Adrien stood and headed inside to tend to their son, moving with the quiet confidence of a man who had fully embraced every aspect of fatherhood. Sadie followed with Sophia, settling into the rocking chair in the nursery while Adrien changed Michael's diaper with practiced efficiency. These midnight moments had become some of her favorite times, the house quiet around them, the older children sleeping peacefully, the baby content in her arms while Adrien sat nearby, sometimes reading, sometimes just watching them with an expression of wonder that hadn't dimmed even after 5 children and 2 years of marriage. I can't believe we almost missed this, she said as Michael latched on to nurse, his tiny hand curled around her finger. We didn't miss it, Adrien said gently. We found it exactly when we were supposed to. But what if the custody hearing had gone differently? What if Catherine and Richard had won? They didn't. And even if they had, I would have fought for you. For all of you. Some things are worth fighting for, Sadie, and this family is everything worth fighting for. As Michael finished nursing and settled back into sleep, Sadie reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. From the desperate widow facing the possibility of losing her children to a woman surrounded by love in all its forms, it seemed impossible that so much could change in just a few years. Do you ever miss it? She asked Adrien as they made their way back to their bedroom. The bachelor life? The freedom to make decisions without considering 5 other people? Never, he said without hesitation. Sadie, I spent 15 years free to do whatever I wanted, go wherever I pleased, focus solely on my own goals and ambitions. And I was profoundly lonely. This, he gestured toward the bedrooms where their children slept peacefully, this is the life I was meant to have. You are the family I was meant to belong to. In their bedroom, as they settled back into bed, Sadie curled against Adrien's side with the unconscious ease of long practice. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, Caleb's driving test, Amaya's art project, Liam's soccer practice, Sophia's toddler tantrums, Michael's teething, but tonight, in the quiet darkness, everything was perfect. Adrien? Yes? I love you. Not just for loving me, but for loving them. For choosing us every single day. It's not a choice anymore, he said softly. It's just who I am. Who we are. Have you ever found love when you least expected it? Share your second chance love story below. As sleep began to claim them both, Sadie thought about the letter she'd found the week before while cleaning out old files. It was one Michael had written to her but never sent, found among his papers after his death. In it, he'd expressed his hopes for her future happiness, his worries about leaving her alone, his wish that she would find love again with someone who would cherish both her and their children. Promise me, the letter had said, that you won't close your heart because mine stopped beating. Promise me you'll let the children see what healthy, happy love looks like. Promise me you'll remember that life is for the living, and you deserve to live fully and joyfully. Reading those words had been both heartbreaking and healing, a final blessing from the man who had given her 3 beautiful children and 15 years of stable love. Michael's letter had given her permission to love Adrien without guilt, to embrace their blended family without reservation, to believe that her heart was big enough to hold love for both the past and the future. Now, lying in Adrien's arms while their children slept safely around them, Sadie knew she had kept every promise Michael had asked of her. She had opened her heart, shown her children what joyful love looked like, and chosen to live fully in each precious moment. Some love stories, she realized, were layered and complex, woven from loss and healing, patience and hope. Some families were created not just through birth but through choice, commitment, and the courage to love again after heartbreak. Some happily ever afters weren't endings at all, but beginnings, the start of something beautiful and messy and absolutely perfect in its imperfection. As Sadie drifted off to sleep, her last conscious thought was one of profound gratitude. She had learned that the heart's capacity for love was infinite, that families could be built in 1,000 different ways, and that sometimes the greatest gift you could give your children was showing them that their mother deserved to be loved completely, passionately, and without reservation. In the quiet darkness of their shared bedroom, with their children peaceful around them and years of love stretching ahead, Sadie Carter fell asleep smiling, knowing that some dreams were worth waiting for, some loves were worth fighting for, and some families were worth everything. Tomorrow, we'll share another story of unexpected love, because every heart deserves a second chance at happiness. Until then, remember that love always finds a way, especially when you're brave enough to let it in. Don't forget to like this video if it touched your heart, subscribe to our Dear Love Diaries family for more stories that celebrate the power of love, and share in the comments below. Have you ever had to choose between protecting what you had and pursuing what your heart truly wanted? Your story might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today.